I have loved thunderstorms for as long as I can remember. Ever since I was a kid, something about the rumble of thunder and flashes of lightning fascinated me. My 6-year-old son seems to have inherited that same love for storms. Whenever the sky starts rumbling, we have a little routine. We go outside and sit under the gazebo in our backyard and just watch the storm roll in. This particular night happened during a hot August evening in Florida. The air had that heavy feeling that always comes before a storm. My son and I were sitting in the living room when the first loud crack of lightning lit up the windows. Before I could even say anything, my son jumped up excitedly and said we should go sit outside. I laughed and followed him. We ran from the back door straight toward the gazebo, getting completely soaked during the short sprint because it was already pouring rain. Our gazebo is actually a really nice setup. I put a lot of effort into it over the years. There is a small bar, a couple of wicker couches, a mounted television, and a little fire pit in the center. Even during storms, it is a comfortable place to relax. Just like we usually do, I turned on the fire pit and switched on the television. My son and I stretched out on the couch and relaxed while listening to the rain hammer down around us. The thunder rolled again and again above us, and we could hear it echoing through the trees surrounding our yard. Our backyard is pretty large, and 2 sides of it are lined with thick woods. During lightning storms, the flashes sometimes light up the entire yard like daylight for a split second. As the storm got stronger, the thunder began to grow louder. The time between the lightning flashes and the thunder cracks was getting shorter and shorter. That meant the main part of the storm was moving closer to us. Soon the lightning was so bright that every flash lit up the entire yard. It was almost like someone turning on a giant spotlight for a second at a time. After one especially massive flash of lightning, my son suddenly squealed and pointed toward the back of the yard. "What?" I asked him. He said he saw someone standing out there. That instantly made me stand up. I walked toward the edge of the gazebo and stared out into the darkness. The rain was falling so hard that it was difficult to see anything clearly. I waited for another flash of lightning to illuminate the yard. A couple smaller flashes happened, but they did not light things up enough to see far into the yard. And another powerful lightning strike split the sky. For that brief moment, everything became bright. And I saw exactly what my son was talking about. Someone was standing near the edge of the woods in my backyard. My stomach dropped. I immediately told my son to run inside the house and turn on the backyard lights. He did not question me at all. He just ran for the house as fast as he could. I stayed where I was under the gazebo and watched the spot where I had seen the person. About 10 seconds later, the backyard lights switched on, but the person was gone. I scanned the yard carefully. I waited for more lightning. Even with the lights and the occasional flash from the sky, I could not see anyone anymore. Whoever had been standing there had disappeared. I did not know if it was a man or a woman. All I knew was that someone had been walking around in my backyard, and that was enough to make me uneasy. I went inside the house and locked every door. I left the backyard lights on. I even turned on the lights in the front yard as well. My son had already told my wife what happened before I even reached the living room. She looked worried and asked if we should call the police. I did not want to scare them more than they already were, so I told her that I saw the person leave the yard. She asked if it was a man or a woman. I said it was a woman, thinking that sounded less threatening. For the rest of the evening, we all stayed in the living room together and watched a movie while the storm continued outside. The thunder still rumbled above the house. Eventually, it was time for my son to go to bed. My wife tucked him in and then came back to the living room where we started watching something else. At some point later, I got up to turn off the outside lights in the front and backyard. When I walked back toward the living room, I saw my son standing in the doorway of his bedroom. He looked frightened. He told us there was someone at his window. My wife and I looked at each other in shock. "What do you mean someone at your window?" I quickly pulled him away from the doorway and moved toward the room myself. I stood there staring at the window, waiting for another flash of lightning. When the lightning finally flashed across the sky, I looked straight at the window. No one was there, but I believed my son. After what I had already seen earlier in the yard, I knew it was possible someone had been out there. I told my wife and son to stay inside while I went out to look around, even though my wife really did not want me to. I grabbed a baseball bat from the closet and stepped outside into the pouring rain. I turned the outside lights back on before heading out. First, I checked the front of the house. Then I moved along the side. After that, I walked through the backyard. I checked everywhere. Under the tables, around the gazebo, beneath the deck. When I finished searching the backyard, the only place left to check was the right side of the house. As I started walking toward that side, I suddenly saw someone. A person wearing a hood was peeking around the corner of the house. I could only see part of their face and head. The rest of their body was hidden behind the wall. From what I could tell, it looked more like a man than a woman. I yelled loudly and ran toward him with the bat raised. The moment I moved in his direction, he disappeared behind the corner. When I reached that spot and turned the corner myself, he was gone. Even with all the lights on around the house, I could not see him anywhere. I went back inside and told my wife and son that everything was okay and that I chased the man away. My wife did not like hearing that it was a man. After that, I went around the house and made sure every blind was closed tightly. Luckily, we were not bothered again that night. My son was still shaken up from what happened. He ended up sleeping in our bed with us that night because he was so scared. I do not blame him. I did not personally see it, but I can only imagine how frightening it must have been for a 6-year-old child to look out his window and see a man standing there in the dark. The city where I live rarely sees any rain at all, so when it finally does happen, people treat it like a special event. Kids rush outside to splash in puddles. Farmers are grateful because their crops finally get the water they need, and the whole place just feels calmer and more beautiful. The last time a big thunderstorm rolled through, my friends and I were all online playing some game together. I honestly cannot remember which one it was now. I first realized the storm was arriving when all of our microphones picked up the exact same loud boom of thunder. It was powerful enough that everyone stopped talking for a second. At first I thought it might have been a gunshot or maybe fireworks going off somewhere nearby. Then I saw a bright flash of lightning outside my window. Curious, I hopped onto my bed so I could look out and watch the storm forming. What I saw outside was far more unsettling than the weather. Across the street, there was a man standing alone. He wore a gray hoodie and a pair of jeans. He looked fairly tall, though not especially muscular, and he was completely still. I could not tell if he was looking directly at me, because his face was hidden in shadow. After a moment, he began walking slowly down the street, which made me think he had not been watching me after all. I felt a bit relieved, though some nervous feelings still lingered in the back of my mind. I returned to my computer and rejoined the game with my friends, as if nothing had happened. About 15 minutes later, the storm had fully arrived. Rain was falling hard, and thunder kept rumbling through the sky. I told my friends I was stepping away for a while, so I could watch the storm. Then I went outside and stood beneath the porch roof, listening to the steady rhythm of rain striking the ground while lightning flashed across the sky. While standing there, I glanced down the street to my left. At the corner, I saw him again. The same man from before was standing there. I felt uneasy, but I tried to convince myself there was nothing strange about it. When rain is rare in a town like mine, people sometimes go outside just to enjoy the moment. With that thought, I tried to ignore it. After about 5 minutes, I decided to head back inside. As I opened the door, I turned back toward the corner where the man had been standing. He was gone now, which somehow made the whole situation feel even more unsettling. Inside the house, two of my younger siblings were dancing around the living room to a Bubble Guppies song playing on television. My other two siblings were somewhere in their rooms doing whatever they usually do. I went back to my room, though instead of joining the game again, I decided to find something else to do. I was still trying to figure out what that would be when my phone buzzed with the familiar vibration of a text message. I picked it up and opened the message. The number was unknown. There were two messages waiting for me. The first one said, "Have you forgotten?" The second one said, "I know you did not." My first thought immediately went to the man I had seen outside, but that idea seemed almost impossible. How would he know my phone number? And why would he single me out for something like this? I figured my friends were probably trying to scare me as a joke. I opened our group chat and asked if anyone had been sending me strange messages. All of them insisted they had not done anything like that. Over text, it is hard to know if someone is telling the truth, but I decided to take their word for it. Eventually, I stopped thinking about it and went to watch television. Some time passed, though I cannot say exactly how long. Then there was a knock at the front door. It was much too late for anyone to be visiting. I checked the time on my phone and saw it was 12:19 in the morning. I went to the window and carefully looked through the blinds to see who was outside, but I could not make out anything. The rain was falling so hard that it looked like a thick curtain of mist covering everything. Then another thunderclap exploded through the sky. The sudden noise made me jerk back and bump my head against the window, creating a dull thud. At that moment, I noticed movement near the door. Someone was running away from the porch. I could only assume it was the same man from earlier. Actually, I felt certain it was him. The strange texts, the figure outside, the knock on the door. It all seemed connected somehow. I considered calling the police, but I had no proof that anyone had really been there. Eventually, I decided to try to sleep. I only managed about 3 hours before another loud thunderclap woke me up. I sat upright in bed, tense and alert. Then I slowly relaxed when I realized it was only thunder. A moment later, another loud bang echoed through the room, but this time it was not thunder. The sound had come from my window. I froze. I had no idea what to do. I did not want whoever was outside to know that I was awake. But what if they already knew? Slowly and carefully, I leaned toward the window and lifted the blinds just enough to look out. What I saw was probably the most terrifying thing I have ever witnessed. The man was standing right there, with his hands pressed against the glass. I could not clearly see his eyes, because they were hidden in shadow, but there was enough light to see his mouth. He was smiling, not a normal smile either. It was huge and twisted, the kind of grin that looked almost unnatural on a human face. After a few seconds, he simply stood up straight and walked away into the rainy darkness. I stayed in my chair the rest of the night. At some point, I must have fallen asleep without realizing it. When I woke up the next morning, I felt confused about why I was sitting there instead of lying in bed. Then the memories from the night before rushed back. I quickly ran to the window and lifted the blinds. There was a small piece of paper taped to the glass. On it were 3 words that still haunt me to this day. "Have you forgotten?" Since that night, I have never seen the man again, and I hope I never do. It was late at night when I finally finished work. The weather outside was terrible, and I was just getting into my car to head home. It was around midnight, and a thunderstorm was pouring down. At the time, I drove a 2005 Ford Fusion. It was a small car and definitely not the best thing to be driving during horrible weather and slippery roads. I took the same route home that I always did. The rain was so intense that even with the windshield wipers set to the fastest speed, it barely helped. My visibility was awful. I was driving about 40 miles per hour on a road where the speed limit was 55. That is how bad the storm was. There were no other cars anywhere near me. Then suddenly, through the sheets of rain that my wipers could not clear fast enough, I saw someone wearing white sprinting across the road. They ran from one side of the woods to the other. I noticed them almost too late. I slammed on the brakes and jerked the steering wheel to avoid hitting them. The car swerved violently. I lost control and slid off the road onto the wet grass before crashing straight into a tree. The airbag exploded out in front of me, and my entire body jolted forward into it. For a moment, I could barely process what had just happened. I sat there stunned and in shock. I already knew my car was completely destroyed, but once I started coming back to my senses, my first instinct was to look around for the person who had just run across the road. I was on a quiet stretch of highway with nothing around for miles. No houses, no buildings, no traffic. There should not have been anyone walking around here, especially this late and in weather like that. Since it was a work night and so late, I was worried no one would answer their phone. The first person I called was my brother. I tried him several times, but he never answered. He was obviously asleep. Then I called my sister and got the same result. I really did not want to involve my parents, but I had no other choice. I called my dad on his house phone because I knew it would wake him up. He answered on the last ring. I explained everything that had happened and told him I needed help. I also told him I had no idea what number to call for a tow truck. He first made sure I was not injured. Once he was certain I was okay, he gave me the number for our family roadside assistance company. He told me to call them right away. He also said he would get dressed and drive to my location. His house was only about 10 to 15 minutes away. Before hanging up, my dad told me to stay inside the car and keep the doors locked. He also suggested I look around carefully to see if I could find the person who had crossed the road. After we hung up, I stayed in the car. I nervously scanned every window, even though the heavy rain made it almost impossible to see anything clearly. I was terrified knowing someone had been out there in the woods. Part of me even wondered if the person had purposely run in front of my car. I called the roadside assistance company, and they said they would send a tow truck immediately. About 10 minutes had passed since I spoke with my dad. I sent him a text asking if he was on the way yet. He replied yes. I had my hazard lights on, and considering my car was smashed into a tree, it should have been easy enough for him to find me. Then I turned to my right side for some reason, almost like I sensed someone standing there. The second I looked over, I jumped out of my seat and screamed as loudly as I could. It felt like my heart had dropped straight out of my chest. There was a man standing right outside my window. He was completely soaked from the rain and dressed in white. He was staring directly into my car, with his mouth hanging open in a strange O-shape. His eyes were squinted as he looked at me. Then he slowly placed both hands on the glass and began rubbing the window. I had no idea what he was trying to do. I shouted at him to go away. Instead, he grabbed the door handle and tried to open it. When the locked door would not budge, he started pounding his fists against the glass. All the while his mouth stayed stuck in that same unsettling O-shape. I panicked and called my dad again. As soon as he answered, I nearly broke down crying and told him a random man was trying to get into my car. My dad shouted into the phone telling me not to unlock the doors under any circumstances. He said he was almost there. He stayed on the phone with me as the man outside began smashing his elbow into the window. I screamed again, and I could hear my dad panicking on the other end of the call. Miraculously, the glass did not shatter. Then, as if some miracle had happened, I saw headlights approaching from down the road. The vehicle pulled up behind my wrecked car. A man outside turned his head toward the lights. The car that had arrived was my dad. The moment my dad stepped out of his car, he charged straight at the man. The creep tried to run back toward the woods, but my dad caught him and tackled him to the ground. I swear my dad beat his face so badly that it would have been completely covered in blood if the heavy rain had not been washing some of it away. He held the man pinned to the ground while I called the police. The tow truck driver actually arrived first. When he pulled up and saw what was happening, he looked completely shocked at the scene in front of him. Not long after that, the police showed up. Watching them put that man in handcuffs was one of the most satisfying feelings I have ever experienced. He was charged for his crimes, and we also pressed charges for the damage he caused to my car. His name was Marcus Green. I never attended the court hearing. My father and our lawyer handled everything. I had no desire to ever see that man again. Even now, the memory of that disturbing expression on his face and the sound of him slamming against my car window is something I know I will never forget.